They sold my house while I was unconscious in a hospital bed. They even celebrated it, laughing about how I wouldn't need it anymore. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined, was that the building they moved into after stealing everything from me already belonged to me. I always thought the quietest moment of my life would be the day I came back home from the hospital. Instead, it was the moment I realized I didn't have a home to return to. My name is Ravna Solin, and at 34 I had spent my entire adulthood believing survival meant staying silent. But silence isn't peace. Silence is what predators rely on. The nurse's voice was soft when she said it. Your emergency contact handled all your affairs, Miss Solin. My emergency contact, my half-brother Colin. I felt a pressure in my chest, not fear, not anger, just a cold emptiness, something I recognized from childhood. When I asked what she meant, she handed me a packet of papers I never signed. Documents claiming I had declared myself unable to maintain property and had consented to a sale. My mother's house, the small, sun-warmed, creaking floorboard house that held every memory I had left, sold while I was unconscious. My hands shook so badly, the papers rattled like tin. That's when the nurse added, almost apologetically, they even changed the locks. I didn't cry, I just nodded as if all of this was somehow expected. And the sad part, a part of me always knew my family would destroy anything they touched. I grew up learning that some wounds don't bleed, they bruise inward. My mother, Leanne, was gentle but fragile. My Aunt Milder, on the other hand, was a storm in human form, loud, dismissive, always right even when she was violently wrong. She raised Colin like he was royalty and treated me like the dust beneath their feet. I was the quiet one, the sensitive one, the easy-to-move-around one. And when my mother died, I became something else. The disposable one. Colin inherited the car, Milder took the jewellery, and I kept the house, but only because they thought it was worthless. They didn't know I had promised my mother I would never sell it. They didn't know it was my anchor. They didn't know it was the one place I ever felt safe. And now it was gone. I sat in the hospital wheelchair, staring at the discharge papers in my lap. The social worker asked if I had somewhere to go. I lied and said yes. The truth was I had nowhere. The house that was supposed to be my refuge had been stolen while machines kept me breathing. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, flickering like they were tired of holding on. Everything felt distant, wrapped in fog. The first thing I did after discharge was go to the house. Not because I believed I still owned it, but because I needed to see it. When I arrived, a new metal gate blocked the path. Fresh paint, new lock, new security keypad. The crepe myrtle tree my mother planted was trimmed back into a shape she never would have approved of. A stranger opened the door. "Can I help you?" she asked. My voice cracked only once. "I used to live here." "Oh," she said gently. "The previous owners said the woman was relocating permanently." The woman, me, erased with a sentence. I thanked her and walked away before my knees gave out. I didn't break down, not yet, but something inside me shifted, a quiet snap like a thread pulled too tight for too many years. I walked down the street slowly, memorizing every crack in the sidewalk, every tree I'd climbed as a child, every corner where my mother and I had laughed. The neighborhood felt the same, but I was different, changed, hollowed out. A child rode past on a bicycle, ringing the bell twice. The sound echoed in my chest like a memory I couldn't quite reach. It took me 3 days before I confronted my family. I didn't plan to, but the universe pushed me. A mutual acquaintance sent me a video, a short clip recorded at a backyard barbecue. In the video, Colin raised a drink and shouted, "To fresh starts, and to getting rid of dead weight." They laughed. Milder added, "That girl should have thanked us. She wasn't coming back to that house anyway." They toasted. My mother's house, my memories, my refuge. A punchline. They weren't ashamed, they were proud. I watched that video until the battery of my phone died. That was the moment I knew something. This wasn't mismanagement, it wasn't a misunderstanding, it wasn't an accident. It was betrayal. I saved the video to 3 different places. Evidence, proof, a timestamp of their cruelty. They celebrated my suffering like it was a victory, like I was nothing, like my mother's legacy was garbage they'd finally thrown away. But they were wrong. I replayed the video one more time before the screen went black. Colin's laugh, mild as smirk, the clinking of glasses. Every second was fuel. I went to Colin's apartment the next morning. He opened the door with a smirk. Wow, look who's alive. He said it like a joke, like a blessing he didn't mean to give. Why did you do it? I asked. Because you couldn't handle it, he shrugged. And honestly, you're better off without that old dump we upgraded. Upgraded. That word stuck with me. Behind him, the apartment smelled like expensive candles and new appliances. Milda sat on the sofa, legs crossed, sipping tea she didn't buy. You should be grateful, she said without looking at me. We didn't leave you on the street. I stared at them. Calm, quiet, just as I had been all my life. They took my stillness as weakness. And that was their biggest mistake. Milda continued talking, listing all the reasons why selling the house was the right decision. She spoke as if I should thank her, as if stealing from someone unconscious was an act of charity. Colin nodded along, arms crossed, eyes cold. I said nothing, I just watched and remembered. The marble countertop gleamed, the leather sofa looked brand new, everything in that apartment screamed wealth they didn't earn. They never asked what I did for a living. They never asked how I survived. They never asked why I travelled so much in my early 30s. If they had asked, they might have been careful. Because while they thought I was insignificant, I was building something. I had spent years working in property risk assessment, dealing with legal loopholes, ownership transfers, asset shielding, and corporate layered real estate protection. I had seen every scam, every forged signature, every shady sale. When I left the country years ago, they assumed I was wandering. I wasn't wandering. I was learning. And quietly, very quietly, I was investing. One of those investments was a small apartment complex I owned under a private trust. The same complex Colin and Milda now lived in. They didn't know. Not yet. But they would. I had purchased the building 3 years ago through a shell company. Layered behind legal protections that made my ownership invisible. It was a smart investment, steady tenants, good location, low maintenance costs. I never imagined my own family would end up living there. But fate has a way of closing circles you didn't know existed. I didn't confront them again. Instead, I filed reports, I gathered documents, I contacted attorneys I trusted. And then I triggered the first step. A residency compliance audit for all tenants of the building, standard procedure for properties undergoing trust restructuring. Colin received his notice at 9:14 a.m. At 9:16 he called me. What did you do? He snapped. I spoke evenly. I did nothing, you should contact your landlord. Landlord, he scoffed. Our landlord lives in another state. I smiled to myself. If only he knew. I ended the call with a simple, good luck, Colin. Because luck was the only thing that could help him now, and even that wouldn't be enough. The audit was real, legitimate, nothing illegal or unethical, just a standard review that most tenants would pass easily. But for people who cut corners, who lied, who bent rules, the audit was a flashlight in a dark room, and I knew exactly what it would reveal. I sat at my desk, fingers steady on the keyboard, filing the next round of documentation. Every word precise, every detail documented. Silence isn't weakness, it's preparation. The residency audit hit the building like a spark in dry grass. Tenants whispered in hallways, notices slid under doors like pale warnings, people lined up in the lobby holding envelopes and questions. But no one panicked more than Colin. I knew because at exactly 2:03 p.m. I got another call from him. We need to talk, he demanded. Now. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched from a cafe across the street as he marched into the leasing office, shoulders squared, face flushed with fear masquerading as irritation. He had no idea the person behind the audit was sitting 20 yards away, stirring chamomile tea. This wasn't revenge, not yet. This was a mirror letting him see the first faint reflection of consequences. This was the beginning of the unraveling. Through the cafe window, I watched him argue with the property manager. His hands moved wildly. His face grew redder. The manager remained calm, clipboard in hand, unmoved by Colin's outburst. Other tenants watched from the corners of the lobby, whispering to each other. Colin thought he could intimidate his way out of anything, but intimidation only works when the other person is afraid. The property manager wasn't afraid. She was just doing her job. And I was doing mine. On my way out of the cafe, the building's elevator opened, and a maintenance worker stepped out carrying a stack of folders. He didn't recognize me, but I recognized the top sheet. Trust Asset Report, Soline Holdings. My name, my private trust, exact, undeniable. I had spent years keeping my ownership invisible, hidden behind layered entities for security. Even now, most tenants believed the building was owned by a faceless investor. That faceless investor was me. The maintenance worker almost bumped into Colin's neighbor, who asked, "Is it true the landlord is restructuring everything?" "Yes," he replied, "big changes coming." I watched the exchange quietly from behind a column. Colin thought life had handed him a new start. He didn't know it had handed him a closed circle. The neighbor continued, "I heard someone's getting evicted. Wonder who it is." The maintenance worker shrugged. "Whoever didn't follow the rules, I guess." I turned and walked away, my footsteps soft against the tile floor. The pieces were moving into place. Slowly, carefully, inevitably. The wind picked up outside, scattering leaves across the parking lot. The sky was grey, heavy with the promise of rain. Everything was aligning. At 7 p.m, I got a message from an unknown number. It was a photo of me, standing near the building hours earlier. Then another message. "Stop whatever you're doing, you don't know what you're messing with." No name, but I knew the tone. Milder. She always communicated like she was the ruler of a kingdom built out of borrowed money and inflated ego. I typed back one sentence. "What exactly am I doing?" Her reply came fast. "You're upsetting the wrong people. Not the truth, not the law, not the rightful owners. The wrong people. People like her." She wasn't worried about legal issues. She was worried about losing comfort, losing image, losing the life she bragged about in social gatherings. The audit wasn't even her downfall yet. It was just her first glimpse of gravity. I didn't respond. I simply blocked the number and continued preparing the next steps. Milder thought fear could control me. She was wrong. I'd lived through fear, I'd survived it, and now I was done being afraid. Fear was their weapon, truth was mine. And truth doesn't need threats to win. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because memories rose uninvited, the kind that sting even after decades. I remembered being 12, clutching a stack of school awards I wanted to show my mother. She was working late, so I waited with Milder and Colin. Milder had looked at my certificates and said, "No one cares if you're smart. Pretty girls succeed, useful girls succeed, quiet little shadows like you just take up space." Colin laughed then, a boy's laugh, but words spoken to a child don't stay childish, they grow teeth. I folded the memory back into my mind, not to dwell, but to understand the kind of people I was dealing with. People who never apologized, never reflected, never assumed their actions had weight. This time they would learn weight exists. I stood at the window of my temporary apartment, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Colin and Milder were sleeping soundly, believing they'd won, believing I was too weak, too broken, too insignificant to fight back. They would wake up soon, and when they did, the world would look very different. The moon hung low and pale, half hidden behind clouds. I pressed my palm against the cool glass and whispered into the silence. "You taught me to be invisible, now watch what the invisible can do." 2 days later, I received an email from my attorney. Subject line: "Found something, call me." I called immediately. "You're going to want to sit for this," she said. She explained that Colin and Milder didn't just sell my mother's house. They created a false rehabilitation authorization. claiming I had appointed them as temporary estate managers in case of medical emergency. Only one problem. The document carried a signature that was supposed to be mine. But I had been unconscious the day it was dated. My attorney continued, "This isn't just unethical, it's criminal." I closed my eyes, not in shock, in confirmation. This was who they were, always had been. And now there was proof. My attorney's voice softened. "Ravener, with this evidence we can file charges. We can get the house back. We can make them pay for what they did." I took a slow breath. "Let's do it." "Are you sure this will get messy, public, painful?" "I'm sure," I said. "They chose this path, I'm just walking it with them." She paused, then said, "I'll start the paperwork today." When I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, not sad, not angry, just ready. I revisited my childhood neighborhood. Not the house, I couldn't bear that yet, but the street, the air, the memory of it. Children played on the sidewalk. Someone grilled chicken on a small portable pit. The smell brought back summers when my mother and I sat on the porch eating watermelon, swatting at mosquitoes, talking about everything and nothing. She always told me, "Ravener, never let people decide your worth. If they try, let life show them." I whispered into the breeze, "Life is showing them now, Mama." And then I saw something I didn't expect. A for sale sign on a house 2 doors down. The current owners waved at me politely. For a moment, just a moment, I imagined what life would have been if the world had been gentler. But gentleness wasn't the theme of my life, resilience was. I walked slowly down the street, letting the memories wash over me. Every corner held a story, every tree a conversation. This neighborhood raised me, and my mother's house had been the heart of it all. I would get it back, not for revenge, for her, for the promise I made. A dog barked in the distance. A car passed slowly, headlights cutting through the dusk. Life moved on, indifferent to my pain. But I wasn't indifferent anymore. The next morning, Colin came to my temporary apartment. He didn't knock gently. He pounded like the building owed him answers. I opened the door slowly. He stormed inside. "Tell me the truth, are you behind this audit?" I paused, letting the silence stretch. "Why would I be?" I asked quietly. "Because they're asking for documents I don't have," he snapped. "Proof of income, background verification, asset verification, what is this?" "Standard procedure," I said. "It wasn't standard before." I met his eyes. "That's because the building wasn't under new oversight before." He blinked. He didn't understand, not yet. But the seed was planted, the panic blooming. The certainty he always wore like armor began to crack. Colin paced my small living room, running his hands through his hair. "This doesn't make sense. Why now? Why us?" "Why not?" I asked calmly. He stopped and stared at me. For a brief second I saw something flicker in his eyes, doubt, fear, the beginning of understanding. But then his arrogance returned. "You're just bitter, you always were." "Maybe," I said, "but bitterness doesn't change facts." He left without another word, slamming the door behind him. The walls shook slightly, then settled. Like everything else eventually would. 3 days later, the building held its mandatory tenant meeting. Every resident received an email stating, "Attendance required, new trust management will be present." Colin assumed that meant some distant investor, someone he could intimidate with charm or confuse with excuses. I knew this because he asked in the hallway. "Think they'll let us off easy if we act cooperative?" Milder replied, "Men like Colin don't answer to owners, owners answer to him. If arrogance were currency, they'd be billionaires." I arrived early, sitting quietly in the back, hoodie up, not drawing attention. The room filled with murmurs and shifting bodies. A few tenants complained about the sudden changes. Others shrugged, used to the unpredictability of landlords. But one thing was consistent, everyone was nervous. Except me. The meeting organizer stepped up. "Please welcome the trust representative." Every head turned as the door opened. And though I remained seated unnoticed, I felt the air shift. They weren't ready for what the next few weeks would bring. Neither was the trust, neither was the building. But they would be. I watched Colin from across the room. He sat near the front, arms crossed, jaw tight. Milder whispered something to him. He nodded. They believed they were in control. That belief wouldn't last much longer. The representative began speaking, outlining new policies, new requirements, new accountability measures. With every word, Colin's confidence shrank. After the meeting, I walked through the city alone. The sky was low and grey, like a curtain pulled tight. The smell of distant rain mixed with warm pavement, a scent that always reminded me of childhood storms. My phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I answered, and a voice I hadn't heard in years spoke. "Ravener, it's Malric." I blinked. Years of memory hit me like cold air. Malric Thorne, my mentor during my early property assessment work. The man who taught me how to analyze ownership structures, how to follow money without leaving footprints, how to pierce through the illusions people build around themselves. "I heard what happened," he said gently. "I'm sorry." I swallowed back, the ache rising in my throat. "You taught me everything that's helping me stand now," I said. "Thank you for that." "You always had the strength," he replied. "You just needed a reason to use it." His words pressed on something deep inside me. A reminder, this wasn't just about property. This was about reclaiming every version of me that had been stepped on. We talked for nearly an hour. He offered advice, connections, legal resources. "If you need anything," he said, "call me, anytime." When we hung up, I felt stronger, not because of what he offered, but because he believed in me, and sometimes that's all you need. I stood on the corner, watching cars pass, people hurrying home before the rain. Life continued around me, oblivious. But I wasn't oblivious anymore. The next morning, my attorney forwarded a message. A contractor involved in the sale of my mother's house wanted to speak. I met him at a small sandwich shop near the courthouse. He looked uneasy, hands trembling, eyes darting around. "I didn't know she was unconscious," he said before even sitting. "They told me you'd moved abroad permanently." He slid an envelope to me. This is proof I was pressured. If anyone asks, I'll testify." Inside were messages, screenshots showing that Colin had offered him an under-the-table bonus to speed up the transfer before she comes back and complicates things. My stomach tightened. Every revelation was another thread pulling the truth together. Another confirmation that this wasn't just betrayal. It was calculated theft. But I didn't explode, didn't lash out. I just thanked him softly. Because I didn't need anger. I had evidence. The contractor looked relieved. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have asked more questions." "You're helping now," I replied. "That's what matters." He nodded and left quickly, glancing over his shoulder like he was afraid someone might see him. I sat alone with the envelope, staring at the messages inside. Each one was another nail in Colin's coffin. I ordered coffee I didn't drink. The cafe smelled like burnt beans and old wood. Outside, the rain finally started, light at first, then steady. I watched it fall, each drop a small, quiet victory. This time, quite literally. The building's inspection report came in, detailing issues the previous management had ignored. None dangerous, but all expensive. Faulty water heaters, cracked balcony tiles, molding drywall in several units, missing documentation for fire alarms. And guess whose unit had the most violations? Colin and Milder's. Water damage behind the wall, unreported modifications, a decorative remodel that violated fire code. And the cost? High. Under the new trust, tenants were responsible for repairs caused by unreported alterations. Meaning, their upgrade was about to turn into a bill. Everything they touched turned into a liability. And soon they discover that consequences don't arrive politely, they arrive persistently. The property manager called them in for a meeting. I wasn't there, but I heard about it later. Colin argued, Milder threatened, neither worked, the violations were real, the costs were mandatory, and there was no escape. One tenant told me later, they looked like they'd seen a ghost. I smiled faintly, not a ghost, just the past catching up. News spreads fast in tightly packed buildings. And whispers spread faster. Tenants started asking questions. Do you know who really owns this place? I heard the landlord is changing everything. I think someone's been faking paperwork. Someone said a family scandal is involved. The building was alive with rumors. And in every hallway, every lobby corner, every mailroom exchange, Corlin and Milder felt the shift. Before they were admired, envied even. Now, tenants moved away from them when they entered the room. People whispered after they passed. Someone even asked them outright, "Did you really take advantage of a sick relative?" They denied it, of course, loudly, desperately. But doubt spreads like ink on water. I didn't need to expose them yet. Their own shadows were doing the work for me. I watched from a distance as their reputation crumbled. Neighbors who once smiled at them now turned away. The building's group chat buzzed with speculation. Corlin tried to defend himself online, but every post just made things worse. Milder stopped leaving the apartment. She ordered groceries online, she avoided the lobby, she hid. And hiding only made people more suspicious. The building manager told me, "I've never seen anything like this. It's like they're ghosts in their own home." I nodded. Sometimes people haunt themselves. At noon, I received another call from my lawyer. "Ravner, we finally uncovered the financials." I braced myself. She continued, "Your family didn't just steal your house. They drained the sale money within 6 weeks." "How much?" I asked. "All of it." A cold, quiet weight settled in my chest. But then she added something else. "And they used part of the money to secure their current apartment, meaning their comfort was literally bought with your inheritance." I closed my eyes. Not in pain, but in clarity. They sold my history to fund their present. Soon they would lose both. My attorney continued, "We have enough evidence to file both civil and criminal charges. The forgery alone is a felony, the financial exploitation is another, and the contractor's testimony seals it." "File everything," I said. "Are you ready for this to go public?" "Yes," I said, "I'm ready." Because silence had protected them long enough, now it was time for the truth to speak. She exhaled, "I'll start immediately. This will move fast once it begins." "Good," I said, "let it move." When I hung up, I sat perfectly still. The apartment was quiet. The city hummed outside my window. Everything was about to change. I walked past the apartment building that night. Lights glowed behind curtains, neighbors chatted on balconies, cars hummed on the street. Life continued as if nothing monumental was coming. But I knew. The paperwork was almost complete, the legal case was lined up, the audit results were nearly finalized, the trust restructuring was ready. And the final reveal, the moment their world would flip, was only days away. I stood there in the cool evening air and whispered, "This is for you, Mama." Not to intimidate them, not to celebrate, but to honor every moment of survival that led me here. Because the payback wouldn't be loud, it wouldn't be violent. It would be truth. And truth has its own gravity. A light rain began to fall. I tilted my face toward the sky, letting the drops cool my skin. The building loomed behind me, its windows glowing like eyes. Inside, Corlin and Milder were living a life built on my suffering. But not for much longer. I turned and walked away, my footsteps soft against the wet pavement. Behind me, the building stood tall and silent, waiting. The day of the full building announcement arrived like a pulse beneath my skin. The tenants gathered in the lobby, some irritated, some curious, some nervous. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. A storm brewed outside, tapping against the tall glass panes. The air carried a scent of wet cement and old carpet. Corlin and Milder arrived late, as if the world should wait for them. Milder wore her sharpest coat, Corlin wore entitlement like cologne. When the trust representative cleared his throat, everyone fell silent. "As of today," he began, "we are introducing the building's controlling partner." I stepped forward. At first, I don't think they recognized me. not dressed in formal black, hair pinned, posture steady. Then Colin's voice cracked through the silence. Ravener. I looked directly at him. Yes, I'm the building's primary owner. The room inhaled as one. His face drained of colour, not shock first but confusion, then panic, then something deeper, the dawning realization that every ounce of confidence he'd leaned on for years had been built on a lie. My calmness wasn't performance, it was years of preparation. Let's begin, I said softly. Milder stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. This is a joke. No, I said, this is ownership. The tenants stared, some in shock, some in admiration, some in quiet, satisfied understanding. Colin's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. I simply stood. We sat in the conference room, me, the tenants, the trust attorney, Colin and Milder. A thick folder lay in front of me. Inside, the forged signatures, the contractor's confession, bank transfers, recorded messages, sale documents, the video of their celebration, proof of every lie. The trust attorney began reading aloud. Each word was a weight, each document a mirror. Each revelation a crack in the image they'd spent years maintaining. Milder tried to interrupt. This is exaggerated. It's criminal, the attorney corrected, not raising his voice. Colin shifted in his chair. Ravener, we can fix this. You sold my mother's house, I said quietly. You spent every cent, you lied about my condition, you forged my signature, and you did it while I was unconscious. Every tenant stared at them, not with shock, with disappointment. There's something uniquely devastating about being exposed in front of witnesses. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't insult them, I didn't mock them. I simply let the truth sit in the air until it became undeniable. Restitution will be arranged, the attorney concluded. Failure to comply will result in criminal referral. Colin closed his eyes. The first tear slid down his cheek, not out of remorse. Out of fear. Milder covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook, not with sadness, with the weight of consequences she'd never imagined would arrive. One by one, the tenants filed out, leaving us alone in the room. Colin finally looked at me. Why didn't you just tell us? I stared at him. You never asked. Part of the restitution agreement required meeting with me again 2 days later, not by my choice, but by legal procedure. We met in the same conference room. This time they entered quietly. Their arrogance was gone, their pride muted, their certainty erased. Milder finally spoke, not loudly, not sharply, just defeated. Why didn't you just scream at us? Why didn't you punish us? I looked at her, and for the first time I didn't see a tyrant. I saw a small, frightened woman who'd built her identity by standing on others. I don't need to hurt anyone to get justice, I said gently. I just needed the truth. Colin swallowed hard, not a single excuse left in him. They signed the restitution agreement slowly, pens trembling. Payback didn't look like revenge, it looked like accountability. And that was enough. The attorney handed them copies of the agreement. You have 30 days to begin repayment. The criminal investigation is pending your cooperation. Milder's hands shook as she held the papers. Colin stared at the table, unable to meet anyone's eyes. When they stood to leave, Colin paused at the door. He looked back at me, his voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. I didn't respond, because some apologies come too late, and some wounds don't heal with words. The door closed behind them softly, and I was alone. But not empty. Full of something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. 1 month later, my attorney handed me a folder. The new owner agreed to reverse the sale, she said. You'll have your mother's house back within the week. I held the document like something sacred. When I stepped inside the house again, the creak of the floors, the faint scent of dust, the slant of afternoon light across the old hallway, it felt like time both paused and healed. I touched the doorway where my mother once hung a paper star I made in 2nd grade. I kept my promise, Mama, I whispered. Outside, a soft breeze rattled the leaves of the crepe myrtle. No applause, no triumphal music, just peace. Bittersweet, quiet, grounding peace. The justice wasn't perfect, nothing in life ever is. But it was enough. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. I walked through each room slowly, remembering the kitchen where my mother taught me to cook, the living room where we watched storms together, the bedroom where she held me when nightmares came. Every inch of this house was a memory, every corner is a story. And I had reclaimed every piece of myself they tried to take. If you're listening to this, and you've been betrayed, dismissed, or erased by people who should have protected you, know this: you are not what they said you were. You are not the failure they painted you as. You are not too quiet, too weak, too sensitive, or too much. You are enough, exactly as you are. The people who hurt you did so because they saw something in you they couldn't control, and when people can't control you, they try to diminish you. But you can't be diminished. Not really. Not when you know your worth. So stand. Stand quietly if you need to. Stand alone if you have to. But stand. Because the truth will rise, it always does. And when it does, the world will see you. Not as they described you, but as you truly are. Strong, whole, unbreakable. And that is the best revenge of all. Not what you do to them, but who you become despite them. So take your time, heal at your own pace, rebuild in your own way. And when you're ready, stand. Your dignity doesn't need an audience, but when the world finally sees it, it will shine. The world is waiting to see you shine. Don't forget to hit follow.